York is one of the most ethnically diverse places on earth. There is hardly a nationality, religion, or an ethnic group that you will not see in New York. In order to represent such a diverse region, what personality traits would a congressman need to have? Today, we'll find out by talking to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Hello, I'm Faz Rahman, and you're watching Cafe DC. There are people who have been in Congress for a very long time. Others are freshmen, starting to serve their first term. Our guest today happens to be a freshman. But before we meet Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, let us view a package on the ethnic diversity in New York.
New York City is often called the melting pot of the globe. It is the largest city in the US and one of the most populated metropolitan in the world, which exerts a significant impact upon commerce, finance, media, art, fashion, research, technology, education, and entertainment within the United States. New York City is home to more than 8 million people, accounting for about 40% of the population of the New York State and a similar percentage of the New York metropolitan area, which is home to about 22 million people. Being the largest city in the US, New York is defined by a long history of international immigration and ethnic diversity, manifesting itself in scores of communities representing virtually every nation on earth. If we look at the history of New York State's ethnic diversity, Little Italy and Chinatown date back to the mid-19th century. African Americans from the South began to migrate to Harlem after 1910, and in 1940s, large number of Puerto Ricans and other Hispanic Americans began to settle in what is known as Spanish Harlem. Since the 1980s, New York City has undergone substantial population growth, primarily due to the new immigration from Latin America, Asia, Jamaica, Haiti, the Soviet Union, and Africa. According to a U.S. Census Bureau report of 2012, in 30 years, there will be no minority or majority within the United States. And that is what's exactly happening in New York. Currently, New York City has 44.6% white population, 25.1% black population, 27.5% Hispanics, and 11.8% Asians. The ethnic diversity of the state is reflected in neighborhoods such as Harlem, Chinatown, Little Italy, Spanish Harlem, Jackson Heights, Brooklyn, and Queens. Over the last decade, the city has been growing faster than the region. New York continues to be by far the leading metropolitan gateway for legal immigrants admitted into the United States. And with the new immigration laws pushed by President Obama, it looks like that New York will keep its status as the melting pot of the world and the gateway for legal immigrants from all over the world into the United States. For Cafe DC, Saqibul Islam, Voice of America.
Congressman, thank you very much for doing this. I know you're very busy. First, let me congratulate you on your election. This is your first term, and you must be very excited. I still see some empty shelves in your office, so still trying to do a lot of work and trying to settle down. And thank you for, again, taking your time out to talk to us.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity to serve the people of the 8th Congressional District in Brooklyn and Southwest Queens. This is my third month in office. There's a lot that's been going on. And I'm looking forward to participating in American democracy at the highest level and getting things done on behalf of the people I've been privileged to represent.
So you're called a freshman congressman since this is your first term. What did you see here? I mean, are you disappointed that you ran or you're happy?
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity, and I certainly am not disappointed. I'm hopeful. I believe that we have a real chance in America for the Congress to come together to find common ground, to move the country forward, for America to continue to be able to lead across the world, be a beacon of democracy, support our allies all across the world. I have a wonderfully diverse district African Americans, Caribbean Americans, Latinos, South Asians, Russian-speaking Jewish immigrants. It's a microcosm of the gorgeous mosaic of New York City and a tremendous reflection of the diversity which we should all embrace in America and across the world.
By some estimates, there are like 81 different languages spoken in your district. So that's quite amazing. I mean, so many different kinds of people, and that must be a big challenge for you.
Absolutely. You know, perhaps 81 different languages spoken in the district. I only speak two. I've got to admit, English and Brooklynese.
Oh,
but
Brooklynese,
I'm working on my other languages. But I nonetheless, despite my linguistic shortfalls, have a great appreciation for all of the cultures and the races and the religions that are reflected in the congressional district. It's what makes us strong. And one of the things that's become clear to me, even over the last couple of months, is that despite whatever cultural or ethnic or racial differences we may have, we all share some common values together. One, everyone wants to make sure that their children have the best possible education, that we return to a strong economy here in America, that we've got safe streets, that we can look out for our seniors in their golden years so that they can retire with grace and dignity. These are things that bring people together all across the 8th Congressional District. And each and every day that I'm here down in Washington, I look forward to standing up for these core values.
I can't agree more, Congressman. Education is the most important thing, especially for a child. And this is such a great message for people around the world that, you know, they have to focus on their children's education. Going back to, again, your district, you said, you know, you also have like South Asians. There are Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. Have you had chance to interact with them, you know, some of at least your constituents?
Absolutely. I've got a very good relationship with the Bangladeshi American community, which is amongst the South Asian community, particularly strong in the neighborhoods that I represent, Ozone Park in Queens, as well as City Point in Brooklyn. And we've worked closely together on some issues of significance. I was able to attend the Diwali Festival a few months ago, and that was wonderful as well. And, you know, the South Asian community continues to grow in the district and all across the city of New York, and will be an important chapter in the continuing book about New York's flow of people from all over the globe into New York City that makes us strong. And the South Asian community, I think, will continue to grow, continue to contribute. It is a very hardworking, spiritual, family-oriented, entrepreneurial community that has made tremendous contributions already. And I look forward to continuing to help the community continue to thrive.
You have a very unique first name, Hakeem, which is Arabic actually, and you're a Baptist, right? How did you get this first name? Because a lot of people think outside this country that because since it's a Muslim and Arabic name, that they also, you know, kind of, you know, contemplate your religion.
Yeah.
So how did you get this?
Well, it's very interesting because Hakeem, H-A-K-E-E-M, is Arabic in nature. Some of my Jewish constituents will pronounce it Hakim because there's also a derivation in Hebrew as well. In both instances, it means wise.
Wise, exactly.
And I think my parents were hopeful for a wise child. I'm not sure if I've lived up to that, but I've attempted to do so. What's interesting is that my middle name is West African, Sekou, and Sekou stands for warrior. And what's interesting, if you put the two names together, wise warrior, I don't know if my parents knew that they were going to raise an attorney and then a member of the United States Congress, but in both instances, what we should all strive to do is be wise warriors.
Congressman, what an impressive political journey. You started out as a state legislature in New York, actually ran for a few times before you were able to win this race, and you lost quite miserably, actually, you know, first two times. What kept
thanks
you?
for reminding me.
Well, you know, I don't want to be the bad person to remind you, but, you know, actually, I'm just trying to put this
in context. I got
exactly.
you.
I mean, you know, this is having lost these races by such huge margins, and then still stay there, and still, you know, you just marched on, and finally you became a member of Congress, as you said, the highest political body in this nation. So, what kept you going?
It was very interesting. When I first ran, I was just a young lawyer, made the decision that I was going to run against a 20-year incumbent who was backed by the Brooklyn Democratic machine, the Albany political establishment. Had no name recognition, no money in the bank, no prior political involvement, but believed that it was an appropriate time for me to offer myself up as a candidate, as an alternative, someone with fresh ideas, with new energy, who was looking forward to using whatever skills and training I'd been able to experience on behalf of the people I hope to represent. We lost that first race. I did get over 40% of the vote, so it provided a foundation. I was disappointed, but when we reflected upon how far we had come electorally in a short period of time, it encouraged me to continue to move forward. I challenged that incumbent again. We lost the second time as well, and that was even more disappointing. But then when I looked at sort of the democratic history of some of our leaders who have risen to the highest heights of governance in America, you realize that almost everyone has experienced electoral defeat at some point along the way. In fact,
Except Mr. Obama.
well, what's interesting about that is that our three previous presidents, Barack Obama, George Bush, and Bill Clinton, all lost their first congressional race. And Barack Obama, when he ran in 2000 against Bobby Rush for Congress, lost by more than 20 points. Now, he's a brilliant, intelligent, charismatic political leader who lost. Bill Clinton is the same thing. George W. Bush has renowned political skills. And the fact that all three of them could have run for Congress at some point along the way and lost, but then come back, picked themselves up off the ground, and risen to the highest heights of governance in America, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, should encourage everyone to pursue their dreams of serving in the public, even if you get knocked down to the ground. And one of the things I've realized throughout life, a knockdown is very different than a knockout. You may get knocked down to the ground, but you have the capacity to pick yourself back up off the ground and keep moving forward. In fact, one of the reasons why I don't like to fly is because I recognize that at some point along the way, you're likely to encounter some turbulence. When you get on that flight up in the air, 40,000 feet high, plane starts rocking back and forth, no place to go at that moment. By the way, everybody on the plane gets religion, starts praying, Lord, just plant my feet on solid ground. But what it should tell you is that you can't get from your point of departure to your point of destination without at some moment encountering turbulence. You're gonna encounter adversity. You're gonna get knocked down to the ground. But you should have the ability to pick yourself back up and keep moving forward.
Great thoughts. And interesting, you mentioned three presidents' names. Does it mean that you have your eyes set on the White House in the near future or maybe a distant future?
No, not at all. I look forward to helping to work closely.
I'm just trying to read your mind.
I look forward to working closely with this current president, Barack Obama. I think he's done a tremendous job under very difficult circumstances, and continuing to serve in the House of Representatives for as long as the people will have me in this institution.
Budget cuts in the U.S. have been a center of debate and controversies. Before we discuss this important issue, let's watch a package.
President Obama says his budget proposal for fiscal 2014, which would take effect in October, will help speed America's economic recovery.
A fiscally responsible blueprint for middle-class jobs and growth.
Mr. Obama's proposed budget is a 2.5% increase from current spending levels, but the president says it would cut the government's deficit by $1.8 trillion over the next decade. The president plans to do this in part by trimming Social Security payments to senior citizens, and that has angered many members of his own party. He would also raise taxes on wealthy Americans. Republican lawmakers like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell have consistently opposed higher taxes.
We don't need a budget that piles on tax increase after tax increase. We need to get government out of the way so the private sector can actually grow again. We don't need a budget that spends more money we don't have.
But Speaker of the House John Boehner, also a Republican, says he does support some parts of Mr. Obama's plan and says agreement is possible.
We don't need to be raising taxes on the American people. So I'm hopeful in the coming weeks we'll have an opportunity through the budget process to come to some agreement.
The president also expressed hope for what he has called a grand bargain to resolve differences over the federal deficit.
When it comes to deficit reduction, I've already met Republicans more than halfway. So in the coming days and weeks, I hope that Republicans will come forward and demonstrate that they're really as serious about the deficits and debt as they claim to be.
The president wants his budget to replace the so-called sequester, a series of automatic spending cuts that took effect March 1st. He calls those cuts reckless. Mr. Obama proposes more spending for education at all levels, including almost doubling the federal tax on cigarettes to pay for a new education program for preschool children. He also wants to raise more money to rebuild roads, bridges, and ports, and to advance science, research, and manufacturing. Kent Klein, VOA News, the White House.
Coming back to Congress, you're on a very important committee, Budget Committee. And especially these days, I mean, everybody's talking about the budget crisis. The United States, somehow, this country, the largest economic power in this world, can't have a budget. And we can't balance our budget. We have sequestrations going on. What the mess is, I mean, when you see this mess, don't you get like, wow. I mean, when I came down here, I have to deal with these challenges and on an important committee. Your thoughts?
Well, certainly it's been a very difficult time economically, but relative to other parts of the world, particularly many nations in Western Europe, America is still in a fundamentally strong economic position. Now, we have our challenges, $16 trillion worth of debt. We've got to be able to deal with that. But the biggest debt crisis that we could encounter moving forward is our inability to continue to borrow at lower amounts at lower rates. And what triggers our inability to borrow at lower rates, if that were to ever occur, would be investors concluding that we have an inability to manage our affairs in a reasonable way. And that really is the biggest problem with this governance by crisis, all of which were man-made and manufactured. And hopefully, now that we're in sequestration and people will start to experience pain over the next few weeks, unfortunately, we'll find the will to come together, negotiate a reasonable and balanced approach to balancing the budget, but also protecting important social safety net programs such as Social Security and Medicare and early childhood education and Head Start and Medicaid.
Why so much polarization in Washington? For the outsiders, at least, I mean, they want to know why these two parties can't work together, especially on very important issues, which affects everybody, actually. These issues affect everybody in this country. Why can't these parties come together?
Well, the last Congress was extremely divisive, and there were a group of individuals, members of the Tea Party, who had a very fixated agenda about how to do things, and many did not seem willing to compromise in any way, shape, or form. But President Barack Obama was reelected. This issue, as it relates to how best to approach our economic difficulty, was fully litigated during the electoral cycle. And as a result, I think that he should be empowered now, after going to the American people all across the land and coming back with a mandate to try and lead us into a place where we can find common ground, and hopefully everyone will be willing to compromise, not their core ideals, but to figure out how to do the right thing for America.
Congressman, you have a beautiful family, 2 beautiful sons. Are they going to follow you in your footsteps? They want to be politicians. Are you setting a stage for them somehow?
You know, I'm not sure what's going to happen with respect to both of them, although my youngest son, who is 8, turning 9 shortly, did say about a year ago that he wanted to be mayor of the city of New York, and we asked him why. He said because the mayor gets to make the rules.
Wow.
So we'll see what happens. I think my oldest son right now is more interested in becoming, perhaps a second baseman in the Major League Baseball team, the Mets or the Yankees. And if that works out for him, certainly it will be an early retirement plan for his parents, so that's not a bad thing as well.
As a congressman, you haven't had a chance to fly out and visit other countries, but would you have a chance in the near future, and which would be the first country to visit on your mind?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's so many important countries. I do look forward to visiting Israel. I think we've got a trip that's planned. I've talked to some folks about visiting Turkey and Bangladesh recently. met with one of my Indian constituents. We've talked about going there. And so,
Can we put you on the list for Pakistan by chance?
absolutely Pakistan as well. And in fact, the Pakistani community, which is largely in the congressional district of Yvette Clarke's, but I also have a growing Pakistani community in and around the Coney Island neighborhood, has been incredibly supportive over the years. We work closely together with them. It's an emerging part of that South Asian community that continues to grow in Brooklyn and in Queens, but all across the city of New York. And so I'm looking forward to visiting a variety of countries, but certainly spending a significant amount of time in South Asia.
That was our show this week. We'll see you again here next week with another important guest. Don't forget to send us your feedback and comments to cd@voanews.com. I am Faiz Rahman. Thank you for watching.